She took the window seat the way she always did, quietly, without fuss, settling her small frame into the worn fabric like she had done it 1,000 times before. She wore a cream-colored cardigan, a pair of comfortable flats, and a small silver pin on her lapel that most people never noticed. She folded her hands in her lap, closed her eyes, and the other passengers filed past her without a second thought. Just another grandmother flying somewhere, they assumed. Maybe to visit grandchildren. Maybe to see a doctor. Just an old woman. Just a window seat. Her name was Ruth Calloway, and the skies she was about to fly through had once known her by a different name. The flight from Dallas to San Diego was supposed to be routine. 2 hours, clear weather, nothing on the radar worth worrying about. The cabin crew moved through their safety announcements with cheerful efficiency. A young man in the middle seat beside Ruth put on headphones. A child 2 rows back kicked at the seat in front of her. Ruth watched the runway begin to blur past the window and felt, as she always did, the quiet pull of the air as the wheels left the ground. She loved this moment. She always had. What nobody in that cabin knew was that the cockpit radio was already buzzing with something unusual. The pilot, Captain James Harwick, had been flying commercial for 11 years. He was calm, professional, and very good at his job. But when air traffic control patched through a priority military frequency 20 minutes into the flight, his hand stilled on the throttle. 2 F-35 Lightning IIs had been scrambled from Miramar. They were not there for a drill. A civilian aircraft had drifted into a restricted military corridor during a live training exercise, and the situation on the ground was escalating faster than the protocols could keep up with. The lead F-35 pilot's voice came through sharp and clipped. His call sign was Dagger 1. He was young, precise, and very close to the edge of his composure. His wingman, Dagger 2, was newer still. The corridor closure had created a cascading problem that neither of them had trained for at this speed, at this altitude, with a commercial flight caught in the middle. That was when the radio did something no one in that cockpit expected. A third voice came through. Calm, unhurried, with the particular authority of someone who has spoken over combat frequencies in conditions that would have silenced lesser people. It said simply, "Dagger Flight, this is Widow 6, I'm listening. Talk to me." Captain Harwick turned to his co-pilot. They stared at each other. In the back of the plane, Ruth's eyes were still closed. Her right hand had moved, just slightly, to the small silver pin on her lapel. She touched it the way a person touches a rosary. Not for luck, for memory. Widow 6 had been her call sign for 6 years over the Pacific, over the Gulf, and once over a mountain range in conditions so severe that the debrief had lasted 3 days and ended with a commendation nobody talked about in public. She had flown F-14s when women weren't supposed to. She had led formations that men twice her age had followed without question, because in the air, where everything stripped away to skill and nerve and split-second judgment, rank and gender meant nothing. What mattered was whether you could hold your line. She could always hold her line. She had heard the frequency open when she'd taken her seat, a faint trace of it leaking through the cabin speaker system, just enough for her trained ear to catch it. She had recognized the situation in seconds. She had asked the flight attendant, quietly, to let her speak to the captain. The flight attendant had hesitated. Ruth had shown her the pin. The flight attendant had not hesitated again. What followed in that cockpit lasted 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Ruth Calloway talked Dagger 1 through the corridor deviation, walked him through the adjustment vectors with the patience of someone who had done this in the dark, in rain, with 2 engines out. She spoke to Dagger 2 separately, steadied him, gave him a job to do so his hands had somewhere to go. By the time the situation resolved, the F-35s had peeled off cleanly. The commercial flight had been cleared, and the air traffic controller in San Diego was sitting very still, staring at his screen, wondering what had just happened. When Ruth returned to her seat, the young man beside her had taken off his headphones. He had heard enough through the cabin speaker to know that something extraordinary had occurred. He looked at her, really looked at her. "For the first time since Dallas. Was that you?" he asked. She smoothed her cardigan, glanced out the window at the blue nothing beyond the glass. Just helping, she said. Who are you? She smiled, small, private, the smile of someone who had made peace long ago with being invisible in the places where she had mattered most. Nobody important, she said. Just an old woman on a plane. He didn't believe her. He would spend the rest of his life not believing her, telling the story at dinner tables and in break rooms, and once, years later, to his own daughter, who would look at him with wide eyes and ask what the old woman's name was. He never found out. Some legends don't need